My name's Mick. I live in the east of England, in a little market town near Ipswich. I have a chronic pulmonary aspergillosis, complete with aspergilloma. My first encounter with the disease was back in 2003, although at the time I did not know it was aspergillosis. I had a chest x-ray, there was an anomaly shown. I was referred to a chest consultant who quite bluntly sat down and told me I'd got lung cancer. He would be taking me into hospital the following day for a CT scan, a bronchoscopy, and then surgery. So a few traumatic hours later, I completed the bronchoscopy and was told by a registrar who was doing the bronchoscopy, "We can't find anything wrong with you, go home." So talk about mixed emotions, being ripped apart and then not. Anyway, I managed to, 2 days later, we chased up my GP and said, "What on earth is going on here?" And he says, "Oh, well, we don't know, but you'll be getting another appointment with the consultant." So we duly had another appointment with the consultant. He says, "I've no idea what's wrong with you. I'm putting it down to atypical TB, and we'll start you on a 6-month course of antibiotics." 6 months later, he discharged me. And at that point, I'm thinking, okay, I'm all right, I'm fine now. We actually moved. We moved up to where we are now in Ipswich. So everything was fine. I did notice I was possibly getting a little bit more breathless, but I was a smoker. I wasn't that particularly active compared to having a fairly active earlier part of my life. And then in 2013, the symptoms flared up, and by symptoms, I started coughing up blood again, which is a horrendously scary experience the first time it happens. But unfortunately, as it progresses, it becomes less scary when you understand what it is and know what's going on. So this time I had an x-ray. I was referred to a chest consultant. I did explain to him what happened the first time with the getting told you got, and he said, "Let's get it straight on, take cards on the table." He says, "I don't know what's wrong with you. It might be cancer. It could be a lot of other things. I won't give any guesses or assumptions of what it might be until I've thoroughly tested it and got a proper diagnosis." So consequently, I had CT scan, bronchoscopy. Saw him a couple of days later for the results, and he sat there and said, "You haven't got cancer." I, of course, gave a great big sigh of relief, like, "Oh, thank God for that." And he just looked at me and said, "There are equally nasty things out there as cancer. Please don't get your hopes up too much just yet." So, okay. He then explained that they had to rule out latent TB, and that would need 8 weeks for the culture to be grown in the lab. So I'd be having a period of 8 weeks where he couldn't continue with the investigation while the lab cultures were grown. He then notified me and said that our results are back. It's not TB. I want you to come in for a needle biopsy, and of the actual mass in your lung. So another day in the hospital. The joys and pleasures of a needle biopsy. All these procedures aren't very pleasant, and they sound a lot worse than they are, but afterwards you think, was I making that much fuss about? So if anyone gets told they've got to have biopsies or bronchoscopies and things like that, go with it. The staff are usually pretty good, and it's uncomfortable, but it doesn't hurt. So I then went home, and then he phoned me one afternoon and said, right, I've got a diagnosis. You've never heard of it. It's called aspergillosis. You have an aspergilloma. So I've gone, I said, you're right, I've never heard of it. And he says, most people haven't. And he said, if you come in and see me in a couple of days, we'll talk about treatment. So I went in to see him, and he says, right, okay. First off, he said, I can't cure you. You're going to have to live with this from now on. As yet, they haven't got a cure. What we'll do is we'll treat you with antifungals. We'll monitor you carefully and see how you go. If the antifungals don't work, there is a possibility of a surgery, and we'll get that done at, I think it's Papworth is the lung one, either Addenbrooke's or Papworth. He said, I'll have you taken in there. I've got friends there in their chest clinic who will carry out any surgery if it's needed. So I went on to the antifungals, itraconazole. He was seeing me every 3 months, and I had a regular monthly blood test. So I was being monitored closely by the consultant. So after about 2.5 years, so he was seeing me every 3 months. The blood tests were still going. What he was doing, he was lining up, getting the radiologist to line up get me in a position which lined up my previous x-ray to the one he took every 3 months. That way he could do a direct comparison as to the state of the aspergilloma. And it actually progressively shrunk. It was getting smaller, to the extent now it's more pleural thickening than a full-blown aspergilloma. So I then came off the itraconazole. I was having a break from the antifungals. Unfortunately, I was told, I saw him around about January one year, 2017 it was. He said, there's something on your x-ray which might be a chest infection, but it's not picking up on any blood tests. 6 months later, I completely collapsed and was carted off to hospital in an ambulance. And it turned out that it was community-acquired pneumonia, which hadn't materialised until I actually collapsed. So I spent 10 days in hospital. And when I came out, along with all the walking aids and extra bits and pieces, because he really knocked me for 6, he put me back on a voriconazole, purely as a safeguard, just in case, because my immune system had a huge hit. He thought it advisable to start the antifungals again, to stop it spreading or getting a hold in there. So, having spent it was 4 months on the voriconazole, I contacted him for a repeat prescription because I had to collect it from the hospital pharmacy. My local pharmacy was unable to prescribe it. I was told at the time by the registrar, stop taking it. your liver readings are far too high. So I stopped taking it. I saw him again at the next appointment, and he says, well, antifungals are off the cards now, but your aspergilloma has completely shrunk. You're not actually showing any signs other than being breathless. And the breathless can come from the aspergillosis, the emphysema, and the dodgy heart, plus all the scar tissue which built up over the years. So we'll try and treat the breathlessness, and we'll take you off all the medication and that sort of thing. So that's where I've been for the last couple of years. As far as the disease affecting me, one minute I can walk upstairs and hold a conversation and carry on afterwards. The next minute I walk up the stairs and I'm incapable of doing anything for 5 minutes. So the breathlessness now is to the extent that I use mobility scooter. If I'm out and about, I have a walker. I manage short distances with a walking stick. So prior to all this, my partner, who is my wonderful carer, without her I don't know what I'd do, she was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, which is exceedingly painful, but it's also strictly limits her mobility. So we would already become used to the fact that we could jump in the car and go on holidays, and we couldn't go for a long walk along the beach or anything like that. So the restrictions with being so breathless wasn't such a significant impact, because we both become used to staying in and not doing very much. The important thing generally is not thinking of what I can't do or what I used to do. It's thinking of what I can do. So I've got various arts and crafts and little hobbies I do. I can go back to doing fishing, which I can provide, and I can park close to where I'm going to sit and do the fishing. So I haven't got to carry the tackle too far. And I have a small trolley to put the tackle on, so I'm only going to wheel it. I can sit and do fishing. I do jigsaws. I do something called crystal art, which is a bit like painting by numbers with little coloured beads. I've got a PlayStation 4 with a virtual reality headset, which is good for a bit of fun and games. So it's just adapting everything. We get all our shopping delivered in. What's important and ideal is having someone, if you've got a relative or you're living with someone, as long as they understand, if they understand your issues, it makes life much easier. I'm also under the hospital dietitian, having been diagnosed with disease-based malnutrition. That's worked very well, mainly because my partner is there saying, "Oh, you haven't had that supplement today, get on and have it now." The other thing that's helped is because when the consultant told me he couldn't do anything more than for me other than manage it, he referred me to a local hospice. So fear and trepidation, a hospice, that's it, that's me lot. You go in the door and you come out in the box. Turns out couldn't have been any wrong than that. The first thing you say, the notice on the hospice wall is, "We're here to teach you to live." The hospice is all about living. It's nothing to do with dying. And that was their approach. I saw their consultant. I went through a series of weekly classes on how to manage your health when you've got a debilitating condition, how to breathe properly, tips and things you can do around the house when you're shopping, everything to make life easier. They provided a yoga class for an hour once a week, which was wonderful. And then on a Monday morning, well, all day Monday, they had what was called a drop-in centre. So the daycare patients or outpatients, whatever you want to call it, who did not need medical support, could go to the hospice and join in their day lounge and get involved in art and craft and read newspapers and drink tea and coffee and have a chat and have some lunch. So that was hugely beneficial. There was no discussion of what you're in here for and what's wrong with you and how long you got. There was none of that talk. It was a social, friendly chit chat, laugh and a joke, without worrying about what was wrong with you or what was wrong. So the sort of camaraderie, being with a bunch of people all in palliative care, because that's what they call the situation where their health service can no longer look at you with a view of curing you. They put you in a position where they'll look after you and keep you going, maintain your sort of health as much as they can without the actual cure at the end of it. Important things with this, any nasty disease is, well, it's managing it. It's doing things that you can do. Don't dwell on what you used to do. There's no point in upsetting yourself over in things like that. Everything you can to make life easier. We pick up sticks. We've got a stair lift put in, pick up sticks in all the rooms. So if you drop something, you haven't got to get down. Because if you've chronic lung disease, you try and bend down to pick something else, you stop breathing. Ideally, having a good support network. My support network primarily is my consultant at the hospital, whom I will phone direct, and the National Aspergillosis Centre via these Zoom calls, and then my friends at the hospice. We're all there to support and help each other.